Hey guys, tonight we re-stepping into a different kind of time machine. Not the sort with glowing lights or futuristic buttons, but one that smells faintly of coal smoke, damp paper, and a bit of grease. You've arrived at a small-town railway station sometime in the 19th century. The lamps are still glowing faintly in the fog of dawn. The cobblestones are slick with dew. And there's a muffled cough from the night porter who looks like he hasn't tea-slept since Napoleon was still stomping around Europe. You probably won't survive this. Of course, there are far too many paper forms to fill out, and if the coal dust doesn't finish you off, the boredom will. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is right now. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The station master is already awake when you step through those heavy oak doors. His coat is buttoned to the throat, even though the air bites less than a winter morning. And his hat sits slightly crooked, because it's been set down and picked up a dozen times already. This man isn't just awake. He's alert, as though the railway clock is wired directly into his nervous system. While most of the town's citizens are still twisting under wool blankets or stirring porridge, he's sweeping his gaze over the silent tracks, mentally preparing for the chaos that will begin as soon as the first train whistle slices the quiet air. You see him moving from desk to window, desk to door, almost like a pendulum. He checks the brass clock fixed to the wall, a piece of precision engineering that, ironically, is often more accurate than the church bell in the square. In fact, one historian jokes that the railway replaced God in small towns. The bell tower once set the rhythm of the day. But by the 1850s, it was the station clock that decided whether you were late, righteous, or downright irresponsible. Historians still argue whether this shift in authority church to clock was the most important social change the railway ever imposed. Some say it was, others insist it was just an incidental convenience. Either way, the master knows the minute hands twitching carries more power than any sermon. A few porters shuffle in, their boots dragging against the platform stones. One of them yawns so wide it looks like his jaw might unhinge. The station master doesn't scold. He simply gives a look. It's that kind of look that says, "Yes, I saw you yawn. Yes, I noticed the loose strap on your satchel. And yes, I'll remember it when your pay is counted." Authority doesn't always need shouting. In fact, the quieter it is, the sharper it cuts. The first duties begin not with a dramatic train, but with keys. Heavy, jingling, brass keys on a chain that looks like it could restrain a bull. Each lock in the station, from the office safe to the telegraph cupboard, has its own key, and the station master guards them like relics. There are stories of station masters who misplaced them and had to face inspectors. Needless to say, those tales end with the kind of career funeral nobody wishes to attend. You notice how he touches them often, not because he doubts their presence, but because they are a tangible reminder that every hinge in this place swings under his control. And then comes the ritual of checking the platforms. He steps outside, boots clacking softly on the stone, breath misting in the still air. The iron rails stretch into the distance, slick ribbons fading into fog. A stray dog trots across the tracks as if it owns them, tail swishing lazily. The master ignores it. There's no regulation against dogs, though one suspects he wouldn't mind writing one if he could. A cat, too, sits curled atop a stack of milk churns, tail flicking as if it's daring the morning to begin. These animals are as much a part of the station as the whistles and the coal dust. It's easy to think of the station as a machine, timetables, clocks, signals. But standing beside the master, you see, it's more like a living body, veins of rail, lungs of steam, and a brain lodged right here, behind his brow. He has to keep the rhythm beating, because if he falters, everything clogs and stalls. The railway isn't forgiving. Trains don't wait politely. They demand obedience, punctuality, and sacrifices of sleep. There's already paperwork waiting on his desk, though it's barely 6 in the morning. Passenger tallies from the night express, reports of missing parcels, requests from merchants about delayed deliveries. You might think it boring, and it is, but every smudge of ink represents someone's day hanging in the balance. That bundle of cloth delayed in the cargo car. It's an apprentice's uniform, and without it, he'll be fined for appearing improperly dressed. That missing crate of apples. It belonged to a farmer who promised the tavern owner fresh cider by evening. One crooked figure in the ledger spirals outward into quarrels, debts, and sleepless nights. The master knows all of this, even if he doesn't say it aloud. He doesn't need to. The power of his job lies in his silence, in the weight of his routine. As the sun pushes up, slanting through the iron framework of the station roof, you can almost hear the town itself waking in response. A cart rattles past on the cobbles outside. Somewhere in the distance, a rooster insists it has authority over the timetable, though the station clock would beg to differ. By the time the first plume of smoke appears on the horizon, the master has already run through his silent checklist. Clock, staff, paperwork, platforms, everything is in place. And here's a quirky tidbit to carry with you. In some stations of the era, the master was expected to personally test the sharpness of the whistle before the first train of the day arrived. Yes, you heard that right. He would literally stand on the platform, signal the driver, and brace himself as the deafening shriek tore through the dawn air. If it sounded weak or off-pitch, it could mean mechanical trouble or, worse, a driver who had been too generous with the gin flask the night before. Imagine starting your day by critiquing a scream of steam at point-blank range. By the time the locomotive finally screeches in, sparks flying off its wheels, the passengers have begun to gather. They shuffle forward, clutching tickets, satchels, and parcels wrapped in brown paper. But here, in this fragile moment before the true flood begins, the station belongs entirely to the master. It is his kingdom, his temple, his burden, and you standing beside him at dawn are beginning to understand why the railway demanded such devotion. Why a man could spend an entire lifetime waking up to iron and smoke and never once question the sound of that clock commanding his every breath. The whistle fades, the platform empties, and yet somehow the station feels more cluttered than before. That S, because the true storm hasn't T, come from the engine. S, roar it, comes from ink. You step back inside with the master and find his desk already drowning in forms. Ledgers lie open like yawning mouths, pens scattered in the way only a man who writes more than he sleeps would tolerate, and the faint scent of drying ink stings your nose. Paperwork, you realize, is the invisible skeleton that holds the railway upright. Without it, the whole machine collapses, no matter how strong the engines or how punctual the clocks. He begins with the register. Each train that arrives must be entered with time, number, and any special notes. Late by 3 minutes, he murmurs as he writes, though his tone suggests that those 3 minutes weigh on him like years. A smudge here, a crooked figure, there it could be misread later, and misreading means disputes, fines, or worse. A crooked figure in this book might someday be used in a court. You can feel the weight of the pen in his hand, heavier than any hammer. A second book is opened for freight, each parcel checked against a long, spidery list. This one says barrel of pickled herring, bound for York. Another, case of sewing needles for the haberdasher. And this, cage of geese, destination uncertain, no consignee found. He frowns at that last one. What happens to geese with no owner? Do they become railway property? Historians still argue whether these abandoned goods were auctioned, donated, or quietly pocketed by enterprising staff. The regulations said one thing. Daily reality often bent the other way. The station master dips his pen again, eyes flicking up to the brass clock. The train just left, yet already another departure must be prepared. He flips to the timetable, a document of such importance it borders on sacred. Each row of numbers, each neatly inked column, is a covenant between railway and passenger. But here, S, a quirky fact for you. Many of those timetables were written less for the travelers and more for the staff. Ordinary folk could barely read the dense grids of numbers. They relied on the master or his clerks to interpret them like priests reading scripture to a congregation. The timetable wasn't so much a guide as it was a gatekeeping tool. The pen scratches, the ink blots. He has to pause often to shake his hand. Writing isn't glamorous, but it's constant, and after hours the fingers cramp like iron claws. His inkwell, chipped at the rim, is filled every few days by the porter who pretends not to grumble about it. In smaller stations, the master had no help at all, and every blot of ink came from his own hand. One can imagine him, late at night, writing by lamplight while the rest of the town snored, his pen nib squealing like a cricket. You notice how the ledgers are stacked, each one with neat labels on the spine. Passengers, freight, telegraph, accounts, incidents. That last one is the most intriguing. Incidents. A word broad enough to cover everything from a broken lamp to a missing child. The master doesn't reach for it often. but you can see its weight in the pile thicker than the rest, dog-eared at the corners. You wonder what lies inside. Pages of small disasters, curious mishaps, perhaps even crimes. One historian found an incident book where a station master had written, "A parrot escaped from its cage, flew onto the track, delayed the 4:15 by 7 minutes." Imagine carrying that responsibility in ink forever. But let's not drift away. Today's paperwork isn't exotic, it's mundane, and that's the danger. The master knows the monotony of numbers lulls the mind, and in those lulls mistakes creep in. He double-checks each line, his lips tightening whenever a porter brings him a slip of paper with handwriting so sloppy it could pass for hieroglyphs. He mutters something under his breath, not quite a curse, not quite a prayer, then rewrites it himself. What strikes you most is the silence. The trains outside might roar, the passengers might chatter, but in here it's only the pen and the clock. Scratch, tick, scratch, tick. It's the rhythm of his life, almost musical if you let yourself drift with it. A man could grow old to that sound, and many did. Entire careers vanished into the margins of ledgers, lives measured not in years but in completed columns. Of course, there's money in the margins too. Those accounts must balance. Ticket sales, freight fees, small fines, all of it tallied with precision. The master tallies them, sighs, then tallies them again. In some stations, inspectors discovered creative accounting. A missing shilling here, a suspicious surplus there. Historians still argue whether these small thefts were common practice or isolated scandals. But here, today, the master is clean, or at least careful enough to look clean. He dots the final figures with the firmness of a man who knows someone might read them in 50 years, which, as it turns out, you are. A porter interrupts to ask about a waybill. The master doesn't glance up, only extends his hand. The paper is placed into his palm, scanned in a heartbeat, and either approved or rejected with a nod. The porter leaves, muttering thanks. Authority, again, in silence. By the time the ink has dried on the last entry, his desk looks like a battlefield. Crumpled slips pushed aside, sand sprinkled over wet words to keep them from smearing, blotting paper folded and refolded. He exhales, closes one ledger with a soft thud, then reaches immediately for another. There is no pause. That's the rhythm of this place. One duty sliding seamlessly into the next. And here another strange tidbits of masters. Grew so paranoid about ink stains on their fingers betraying sloppiness that they wore thin leather covers on their hands while writing. Imagine turning a page with fingertips dressed like a fiddler crab. Yet, perhaps, that was their armor. The pen, after all, was as much a weapon as the whistle. You lean back, watching him work, and realize that this mountain of paperwork isn't a side task, it is the railway. Every passenger, every parcel, every delay is preserved here, pressed into history one scratch at a time. Without it, the trains might still run, but no one would ever trust them. The master knows this, which is why he writes as though lives depend on it, because, inconveniently enough, they do. The pen is set down for a moment, but the master doesn't rest. He glances again at the brass clock, which seems almost alive, its pendulum swinging with that unforgiving certainty that rules his life. "The clock," he mutters under his breath. "Not for you, not for anyone, really." But perhaps as though the words themselves are a charm to keep it steady. You realize very quickly that in a railway station, time is not a gentle suggestion. It is a tyrant. Outside, the town's church bell begins to toll, announcing an hour the townsfolk have trusted for centuries. But here in the station, the master shakes his head slightly. The bell is wrong 3 minutes, slow by railway reckoning. And that tiny difference is a chasm when you consider a train thundering down the track at 40 miles an hour. 3 minutes is the space between an orderly crossing and a collision that ends up splashed across newspaper columns. Historians still argue whether railway standard time was a blessing or a curse for communities. Some claim it unified the country, knitting together far-flung towns under one clock. Others argue it eroded local traditions, stripping villages of their independence, even their sense of self. The master doesn't dwell on such debates. He simply reaches for the winding key, steps toward the heavy clock on the wall, and adjusts it by a hair. That single motion, barely a twist, is a declaration of loyalty, not to the church bell, not to the sun in the sky, but to the timetable printed and distributed by the railway company. That timetable is the scripture, and the master is its priest. Time governs everything. A porter's yawn must be cut short because the train won't wait. A merchant's complaint about a delayed crate is met with a firm gesture toward the clockier apples dan tea matter. "Sir," the minute hand does. Even his own meals are dictated by it. Breakfast snatched before the 7:42 arrives. Tea swallowed between the 9:10 and the 9:36. And supper never before the evening express has screeched into the night. Come, and here is a quirky tidbit that might make you smirk. Some station masters were known to deliberately set their pocket watches 2 or 3 minutes fast, just to terrify porters into moving quicker. Imagine that you think you've got a full 5 minutes to haul a crate across the platform, only to find the master insisting you're already late. The psychological trick worked more often than not. Porters cursed under their breath, but the trains left on time. The master pulls a small silver watch from his vest pocket now. It's polished to a mirror shine, and when he flips it open, you notice the faint etching on the inside of the leader gift, perhaps from a railway company marking years of service. He compares its steady tick with the wall clock, nods in satisfaction, then slips it back into its place. That watch is more than jewelry. It's his sword, his shield, his constant reminder of duty. Without it, he'd be unarmed. You begin to notice how often his gaze drifts back to the clock. He speaks with the telegraph clerk, but his eyes flick upward mid-sentence. He scrawls a note in the freight ledger, but his head tilts slightly, listening for the tick. Even when he steps outside to scan the tracks, the time is on his lips. He hums the rhythm unconsciously, as though his body itself has been tuned to the railway's heartbeat. Of course, this tyranny of time bleeds into the passengers as well. They arrive in clusters, glancing nervously at the clock above the platform. Some tap their boots impatiently, others fumble with tickets, eyes darting between luggage and clock face. A mother pulls her child by the hand, scolding him for dawdling. We'll miss it, can't you see? The child, perhaps 6 years old, has no real concept of what missing it means. To him, trains are eternal, iron creatures that will always be there. But the master knows better. He's seen doors slam in faces, seen desperate men run alongside carriages until their breath collapsed. The clock allows no mercy. There's even a superstition whispered among the porters that the clock in the station is cursed. Too many men, they say, have built their lives around its tick, only to find themselves aging faster than they should. Look at the master, now his back stiff, his hair graying earlier than his years suggest. One porter once muttered that railway time steals your bones. It's nonsense, of course. But standing here with him, watching the way he orbits around the pendulum's swing, you start to wonder if there isn't some truth in it. And here comes the scholarly twist. Historians still argue whether people truly lived by the clock before the railway. Diarists from rural villages suggest most folks marked their day by the rising sun, meal times, or the toll of the church bell. The idea of waking at exactly 7:15, rather than when the light was good, would have seemed absurd. But within a generation, railway time rewrote human behavior. Even school lessons and factory shifts began aligning to the Master S clock rather than the Farmer S crowing rooster. You're witnessing that cultural shift firsthand here, watching one man's life change to a minute hand. The master rubs his temples briefly, then shakes himself back to duty. Another form must be signed, another parcel checked, another porter reminded. But underneath it all, you can feel the pull of time, like a tide dragging at his ankles. It is never enough, never satisfied. If he has one enemy, it isn't unruly passengers or broken axles, it's that relentless tick, always demanding more precision, more obedience, more sacrifice. And as you sit beside him, listening to the steady tick-tick of the brass clock mingling with the faint hiss of steam outside, you realize this: the master isn't just keeping time, time is keeping him. The clock ticks on, but the master's attention shifts to the platforms again. Out there, order isn't kept with ledgers or pensets ruled by color and light. He steps toward a tall wooden cupboard, unlocks it with one of those heavy brass keys, and pulls out the implements that will guide an entire day's worth of trains. Signal flags, lanterns, and a few spare wicks, tucked neatly in cloth. To the untrained eye, it might look like a box of camping supplies. But in his hands, they are the thin red threads preventing catastrophe. He tests a lantern, trimming the wick until the flame burns evenly, then holds it up to the light seeping through the station windows. The glass has been polished until it gleams like crystal. A lantern with soot on the inside is more than ugly, it's dangerous. A dim glow could be mistaken, and mistaken signals turn into wrecks. You remember those headlines about twisted carriages and mangled iron. They often began with one faint or misread lamp. Outside on the platform, he unfurls the signal flags. Red for stop, green for all clear, white for special instructions. He gives them a brisk shake, like a conductor about to begin a symphony, and you see the porters glance his way. They know the choreography where every gesture must be crisp, decisive, impossible to misinterpret. The master himself admits no flourish, no wasted movement. His signals are sharp, almost military, as though he's drilling an invisible regiment of engines. And here's a quirky tidbit that might lodge in your brain. In some rural stations, there were stories of children mimicking the Master S signals for fun, waving scarves or rags at passing trains. Once or twice, drivers mistook these for genuine instructions, slamming brakes or sounding whistles in alarm. Afterward, furious masters would march into town demanding parents discipline their offspring, warning that games with flags could cost dozens of lives. Imagine being scolded for waving laundry on a line, because it looked too much like a stop order. The master climbs the short steps of the signal post now, lantern tucked under his arm, and peers along the track. From here he commands the veins of iron stretching into the fog. His hand rises, the flag unfurls, and a distant driver answers with a blast of the whistle. It's a dialogue older than some townsfolk alive, this conversation of flag and horn. The engine slows, obedient to that flutter of cloth in the master's grip. Historians still argue whether the manual signaling system was genius or madness. Some say it was a marvel of human precision, one man S, arm enough to stop iron beasts weighing tons. Others insist it was reckless, relying too much on eyesight and nerves. A brittle system doomed to fail in fog, rain, or human error. You can see both sides here. The master, with his steady gaze and firm gestures, makes it look effortless. But you imagine a weary or distracted man, and suddenly those bright flags seem terribly fragile. Back on the platform, he hangs the lanterns in their appointed hooks. Daylight may be bright, but twilight creeps quickly, and a lamp not hung in its place at the right moment can mean disaster. He checks each hook twice, a habit so ingrained it's almost muscle memory. Left, right, center. The glass clinks faintly as he taps it with his nail, testing for cracks. A cracked globe could splinter under heat, plunging a signal into darkness mid-shift. That thought makes him frown, and he places one lamp aside to be refitted later. The porters know better than to interrupt him during this ritual. They hover in the background, lugging crates and sweeping debris. But none dares speak while the master inspects his lamps. This is his sacred hour, his communion with the tools that will decide whether trains glide safely past each other or crumple together in ruin. His silence says more than any lecture. And here's another strange fact. Some stations hired lamp boys, apprentices barely into their teens, whose sole job was to keep lanterns burning. They trimmed wicks, refilled oil, and lugged the glowing beacons up ladders while the master barked instructions. Many of those boys ended their days with burns, soot-choked lungs, and an odd walk from carrying fuel cans too heavy for their size. Yet, without them, the night railway would have been blind. The master straightens, satisfied at last. His tools are ready, his flags folded neatly once more, his lamps aligned. He takes a slow breath, gazing down the rails as if measuring the horizon with his eyes. You see a train's plume in the distance, a faint line of smoke rising against the pale sky. In moments, the whistle will sound, the lamps will glow, the flags will wave, and his orders will ripple out across iron and steam. And as you stand with him, the realization settles in. The station's order is not built only on timetables and ledgers. It's built on the certainty that when one man raises a lantern, an engine driver miles away will see, trust, and obey. The whole system, enormous and roaring, rests on fragile beams of light and cloth. And it is the master's duty, every dawn, to make sure those beams never falter. Word count, 1,365. The smoke rises, the lamps gleam, and suddenly the quiet station is no longer quiet. The passengers have arrived. They trickle in, at first an old man in a patched coat, clutching a paper parcel like its treasure. A young woman with a bonnet tied too tightly beneath her chin. A nervous boy carrying a letter he has been told not to lose. But within minutes, trickle becomes flood. The master watches from his post, posture stiff, hat tilted just enough to command authority. This is the part of his day where the human tide must be channeled like water, and he is the dam. They're not all polite, of course. Some are late and frantic, shoving forward as if elbowing the clock itself. Others arrive absurdly early, demanding reassurance that the train will not leave without them, even though the timetable makes that perfectly clear. One man rattles his ticket in the master's face, asking if this scrap of cardboard really guarantees him a seat. The master simply nods short, curt, and definitive. He does not indulge panic. His tone alone, calm and clipped, is enough to hush a dozen doubts. Children tug at their mother's skirts, eyes wide at the sight of the massive locomotive, which looms like some iron monster breathing steam. One little girl refuses to step closer, clinging to her doll while the station cat rubs against her ankles, utterly indifferent to the drama. Putter bends to coax her forward, but the master merely signals with his eyes. The train will not wait. Families must decide for themselves whether to be brave enough to board. Here's the odd thing. Rail travel was still new for many in the 19th century, and some passengers were genuinely terrified. There are diary entries where travelers confessed to fearing their souls might not survive the unnatural speed of 30 miles an hour. Historians still argue whether such fears were widespread or exaggerated in memory, but you can feel a trace of it here, in the tremble of hands passing tickets, in the quickened breath of first-time riders. The master fields questions like a fencer parrying blows. "Which platform, sir?" he answers with a nod. "How long is the stop?" He replies with a precise number. "Will there be a refreshment car?" That one earns the faintest twitch of a smile. Refreshments are for the wealthy lines, not this sleepy station. Still, he gestures toward the porter selling tea from a battered tin urn, and the passengers shuffle that way, reassured that at least something warm awaits. And then there are the stragglers, always stragglers. A man running with one boot half-laced, a woman waving frantically at the conductor as though sheer emotion might halt steel wheels. The master's decision in these moments is absolute, hold or go. He glances at the clock, then raises or lowers his hand, and in that simple act decides whether someone's journey begins or ends today. His face shows nothing, but you sense he remembers. He knows the sting of being too late, the fury of watching a train pull away. Yet he does not bend. To bend for one means chaos for all. Quirky tidbit for you. Some stations kept a padded bench in the waiting room, unofficially called the sob seat. It was for those who had missed their train, where they could collapse in dramatic misery before trudging back home. Imagine the fabric worn thin by disappointment, soaking up tears and curses for decades. The master might pretend not to notice, but he always did. Back on the platform, the shuffling continues. Luggage is stacked, parcels tied, umbrellas poked dangerously close to faces. The master barks a single word, and somehow the chaos rearranges into lines. Passengers respect his authority, not because he shouts, but because he never doubts. When he says this way, there is no room for hesitation. His confidence is contagious. One passenger tries slipping onto the wrong carriage, hoping to snag a better seat. The master appears at his elbow, seemingly out of nowhere, hand firm on the man's shoulder. Not that one. His voice is quiet, but it brooks no argument. The man mutters something about comfort, then slinks back to his proper place. The master's eyes linger, making a silent note. He sees everything. Children continue to tug. Old women sigh. Merchants grumble. And lovers exchange hurried words before the train whistles again. The master stands still, the one fixed point in this swirling crowd. His job, ISNT, just to move them from waiting room to carriage-it. S, to keep them calm, to absorb their fears and foolishness, so that the railway appears infallible. Passengers believe in the railway because they believe in him. And then, with a sharp motion of his hand, the doors slam shut. The whistle screams. The engine lurches forward. The crowd disperses like smoke. Some remain behind to wave. Others hurry away to catch breakfast. But the platform itself empties once more. The master exhales quietly, as if releasing all their noise from his lungs. Yet he does not linger. Already he turns toward the paperwork awaiting him. Already he notes the exact time of departure. To you, it may seem exhausting, shepherding so many strangers with so little rest. But for him, it's simply another tide, another wave channeled safely past. And tomorrow, the tide will come again, and again, and again. The passengers have vanished. The platform clears, and the station exhales. But the silence doesn't last long. From the far end of the yard comes a chorus of clucks, bleats, and the occasional irritated moo. The master's gaze shifts, and with a sigh that feels heavier than all the ledgers combined, he strides toward the freight section. This is the other half of his domain, not humans with luggage, but crates, barrels, sacks, and animals that decidedly do not care about timetables. You see them lined up, wooden boxes marked with stenciled lettering, iron-bound trunks, wicker baskets buzzing faintly with unseen contents. A porter grunts as he hauls a barrel of salted fish, muttering curses under his breath. Another struggles with a cage of chickens, feathers flying everywhere as the birds protest violently against the indignity of travel. The master steps into the chaos with calm precision, clipboard in hand. One by one, each item is checked against the freight ledger. One case of fabric, bound for Manchester. 2 barrels of ale for the publican in town. A crate of boots, delivery uncertain. His voice is steady, but his pen moves quickly, scratching neat strokes that make order out of this barnyard uproar. Here's a curious historical fact. Livestock transport by rail wasn't just common, it was essential. Entire markets depended on animals arriving alive, preferably with all their legs still functioning. Some lines even built special cattle vans, wooden wagons with slatted sides so the beasts could breathe during the journey. Historians still argue whether these journeys were humane or borderline cruel, considering the cramped spaces and long hours. But the station master didn't have the luxury of philosophy. His duty was simple make sure the animals loaded, the paperwork matched, and nothing broke loose to terrorize the platform. And yes, things broke loose. There are stories half comical, half tragic of pigs escaping onto the tracks, goats climbing into luggage carts. Even one incident where a startled horse bolted through the waiting room and left hoofprints on a ticket clerk's desk. Quirky tidbit for you. In 1872, a bull reportedly smashed through the side of a cattle van near Derby and trotted down the line, delaying 3 trains before anyone dared go after it. Imagine explaining that in the incident book. The master doesn't flinch as a sheep bleats directly in his ear. He jots the number 42 sheep, consigned to Leeds, then signals for the porter to guide the bleating cargo toward the correct wagon. He knows from experience that sheep have no respect for lines or gates. If one wanders off, the others follow, and soon the platform becomes a woolly stampede. He positions himself strategically, a human fence, shepherding with nothing but a sharp clap of his hands and that unwavering stare. Not all cargo is alive. Some is delicate, requiring his special attention. He kneels briefly to inspect a wooden crate labeled glass handle with care. He raps it gently with his knuckles, listening for the hollow rattle inside. Satisfied, he marks it off the ledger, though he knows well enough that no amount of careful handling can guarantee safe arrival once the wagon jolts and rattles for miles. Still, the ritual matters. If the glass arrives shattered, no merchant can accuse the station master of negligence. He inspected it personally and wrote it down in black ink. One porter complains loudly about the stink of fish. The master doesn't even look up, simply says, "It's not the fish that stink, it's your attitude." The men laugh, the porter blushes, and the work continues. He knows when to cut with authority, when to lighten with sarcasm. It's a balancing act, as delicate as the glass crate itself. The cattle wagon looms near the siding now, its gate creaking open. The animals hesitate, hooves clattering on the planks, eyes wide with mistrust. The master doesn't shout. Instead, he gestures for hay to be scattered inside, and within minutes, curiosity overcomes fear. One cow steps in, then another, and soon the rest follow. You see the faintest smile tug at his mouth, victory won without force, quieter, perhaps, but more lasting. Historians still argue whether station masters were overburdened with duties beyond their training. After all, here is a man who one moment inspects telegraph wires and the next wrangles livestock. Some scholars argue it was unfair, stretching one profession into 10. Others insist that was precisely the point. The master embodied the railway's total authority, responsible for every soul and object that touched his platform. Watching him now, clipboard in one hand, hay dust on his coat, you sense the truth lies somewhere in between. When the last crate is loaded and the final tally marked, the master brushes his hands against his trousers, as though shaking off the smell of animals and ink alike. The platform is calmer now, the chaos caged and carted, but his day is only half finished. Already a telegraph boy hurries toward him with a slip of paper clutched in his fist. Another message, another duty. The master doesn't sigh, doesn't frown. He just straightens, adjusts his hat, and accepts the note, because for him, cargo or cattle, ink or feathers, it's all the same railway heartbeat. He is its keeper. The telegraph boy hands over the folded slip, its edges smudged with the dust of hurried travel. The master accepts it with the same solemnity as he would a sealed royal decree. His thumb smooths the creases before he reads. The paper carries a simple string of clipped words, each stamped in the staccato rhythm of dots and dashes translated by the operator at the next junction. The message is short: up express, delayed, mechanical fault, hold siding clear, await further. To most eyes, it might read like an incomplete sentence, cold and lifeless. But to the master, this is no mere scrap of text. It is a pulse in the great nervous system of the railway, the whisper of iron arteries stretching across the country. He nods once, folds the paper, and tucks it into his ledger. The decision is already made, siding to be kept open, timetable adjusted. The flow of trains cannot be trusted to guesswork. Telegraphy in the 19th century was as radical as the internet is to us today. Before its arrival, a station's knowledge extended only as far as the eye could see. Once the lines were strung on poles and wires began to hum, stations became interconnected, each one receiving faint electrical whispers from distant miles. Some historians say the railways themselves funded more of the early telegraph networks than governments did, for safety demanded it. Imagine trains rushing along at 20, even 30 miles an hour. Marvel then yet, all relying on messages that could travel instantly through copper veins. The master steps into the telegraph office, a cramped side room smelling faintly of oil and singed dust. You notice the brass instruments on the table, their needles flicking and trembling. The operator, a pale young man with sleeves rolled to his elbows, listens intently as the clicker taps out a fresh message. His ear is tuned to rhythm as if it were music. The master doesn't interrupt. He waits, hat in hand, until the operator looks up and scribbles the words. Another delay, another instruction. Goods train diverted. Priority mail expected. The master collects this second note, compares it with the first, and in seconds reshuffles the invisible chessboard in his head. The goods train will need rerouting to a siding further down the line, and the mail must be allowed to glide through without hindrance. He knows the weight of mailbags urgent, letters, contracts, newspapers carrying the latest scandals. The public may forgive late cows, but not late correspondence. And here lies another of his strange burdens. The telegraph has made information instant, but bodies and machines still move at human pace. The master sits at the junction of these worlds, where delay is unacceptable yet inevitable, where expectation outpaces steel. His pen scratches a fresh set of notes, orders to be passed along to the porters and signalmen. You see the familiar ritual again. Ink to paper, paper to action, action to iron wheels. A curious tidbit worth noting. Many station masters were trained personally in telegraphy. Manuals from the era list entire alphabets of dots and dashes, with stern warnings never to misplace a single signal. A dot mistaken for a dash could reroute an entire train or worse, cause two to meet head-on. Some even practiced at night, tapping messages to one another for speed. One Victorian diary records a master boasting that he could converse with a friend in the next town without leaving my chair, as if we spoke across a table. The marvel of it would not fade for years. The operator shifts in his seat, waiting for the master's reply. Slowly, with measured care, the master dictates a response. His voice is low, almost meditative, as though every word carried the weight of iron rails. The operator taps, the machine clicks, and the message vanishes into the wires. Somewhere down the line, another master will receive it, unfolding the same slip of paper, making the same calm adjustments. You notice how this rhythm message, adjustment, response forms its own kind of breathing. The master never panics, never rushes. Instead, he bends time to his will. He stretches a delay into a space of calm authority. He shrinks an urgent notice into a line of ink. In a way, the telegraph is both his chain and his liberation, binding him to constant updates, yet granting him power to shape them. He leaves the telegraph room now, stepping back onto the platform where the air feels heavier, laden with coal smoke. The notes are filed neatly, the orders distributed. Signalmen shift their levers, porters adjust their loads. Even the livestock seem calmer, as though sensing that order has been restored. The master pauses by the great station clock, checks its face against the schedule in his hand, and once again synchronizes his entire world. A passerby, seeing only his upright figure and measured stride, might assume his duties are simple. But you have now glimpsed the hidden layer the invisible web of wires, the language of dots and dashes, the paper slips that carry both risk and salvation. Every tick of the clock, every rumble of approaching wheels is tethered to that humming line above the tracks. The master tilts his head once, listening, as though he can hear it himself, the faint vibration of the telegraph wires singing in the wind, carrying secrets and instructions from towns he has never seen, yet must trust. For him, it is no longer a marvel. It is simply another heartbeat of the railway, steady and unending. Rain begins to spatter against the slate roof, soft at first, then heavier, as though the weather itself has chosen to test the master's patience. The platform grows slick, and the air fills with the scent of whetstone and soot. Such shifts in the elements are nothing new. They are another variable in a life governed by variables. Still, storms carry weight, for they slow trains, rattle nerves, and test the patience of passengers who are quick to complain. The master stands near the doorway of his office, hat brim tilted low, and surveys the scene. A wagon of coal has broken a wheel just outside the goods shed, the axle splintered on a rut in the uneven cobblestones, and now the cart tilts at an awkward angle, blocking a vital pathway. Two porters strain against it, shoulders pressed to the load, while the driver shouts orders of little use. Already, crates of provisions wait impatiently for transfer, their painted letters warning of perishable goods inside. Without fuss, the master signals for a carpenter from the yard. A wedge is hammered under the axle, ropes tightened, and within minutes the cart is shifted aside. The crates can now be carried in, one by one, the porters grumbling but moving steadily. No raised voice from the master, no panic, just the quiet application of authority. He has learned long ago that shouting rarely makes wheels turn faster. Inside, another crisis brews. A passenger train due from the north is delayed by an obstruction on the tracker-fallen tree. The telegraph slip had noted earlier. The delay stretches from 10 minutes to 20, and whispers ripple through the waiting crowd. Some mutter about missed connections. Others complain of the damp draft creeping under the station doors. The master listens, makes note, but offers no false promises. The train will arrive when the line is cleared. He tells one anxious traveler, his voice calm, his words slow. The tone carries more reassurance than the content. People crave steadiness, and he provides it. In truth, he has seen worse. A winter frost years earlier had frozen the points solid, stranding an entire express in the snow for nearly half a day. Passengers shivered, lanterns flickered, and tempers flared. Yet the master remembers it less as disaster and more as routine challenge. One by one, fires were lit in nearby rooms, kettles boiled, children calmed. Order was not restored by machinery but by patience, by steady presence. Even now, as thunder rolls faintly in the distance, you see how little the storm shakes him. He has learned that calamities come in many guises: broken wheels, stalled engines, surging crowds, even rumors that spread faster than trains. The master treats each as part of the cycle, neither rare nor surprising. His uniform may grow damp, His ink may blur with stray droplets. Yet the system carries on. A curious record survives from the era station masters, often wrote in their daily logs not only the times of arrivals and departures, but also weather conditions, accidents, even small misbehaviors. One entry might read, 11:40 train to Bristol, delayed 20 minutes, owing to storm. 2 gentlemen passengers quarrelsome. Another note simply, cow strayed onto line, removed without injury. To the modern reader, these appear trivial, yet they reveal how intimately the master's duties were bound to unpredictability. Back on the platform, the storm thickens. Water runs in shallow streams across the flagstones, and lamps flicker in the wind. The master walks the length of the platform, lantern raised high, to check the switches at the far end. The metal levers are slick, but they hold firm. He inspects the gutters, the drainage, the signal arms that sway uneasily in the gusts. A porter trails him with a waterproof sheet, eager to cover the master's shoulders, but he waves it away. Rain is no stranger, and dignity matters more than dryness. As he returns, the sound of an approaching whistle cuts through the downpour. The delayed passenger train finally crawls into view, steam rising in great clouds. The master stands ready, posture unwavering, as the carriages grind to a halt. Passengers spill out in a rush of umbrellas and muffled complaints, but he notes the relief beneath their irritation. The journey continues. The system remains intact. In these moments, one senses the paradox of his work. 2 others, crises, are dramatic interruptions. To him, they are the rhythm itself, part of the ordinary cycle. His calm steadiness, repeated day after day, becomes the very mechanism that transforms calamity into routine. The storm is only weather, the broken cart only timber, the late train only a line in the logbook. And so, after ensuring that passengers are shepherded indoors, that crates are stowed, that the platform is cleared of standing water, he retreats once more to his office. He sits at his desk, damp sleeve resting on the leather blotter, and writes his report. Ink flows steadily across the page. Times, conditions, delays, solutions. Outside, thunder still rolls, but inside, the order of the railway is preserved, captured in neat handwriting, sealed within the ledger. It is here, perhaps more than anywhere, that you see the quiet truth of his calling. Not in the grandeur of locomotives or the bustle of crowds, but in the calm reshaping of disorder into routine, in the transformation of crisis into memory. Tomorrow will bring its own calamities, just as today has, and the master will meet them with the same unshaken rhythm, the same ink, the same calm gaze upon the great station clock. Morning gives way to afternoon, and with it comes a peculiar tension that the master has long recognized. It is not caused by any storm or accident, but rather by the arrival of inspectors and superiors figures, whose visits can unsettle even the most practiced routines. Their appearances are not daily, nor always predictable, yet the station must be kept in a state of constant readiness. For one never knows when the polished boots of an official will step onto the platform. Today is such a day. Word has traveled by telegraph that a regional superintendent will be touring several stops along the line. His carriage will likely be neat, his watch gleaming, his expression set in the neutral sternness of authority. The master prepares accordingly, though his preparations differ little from what he does each day. Floors are swept, brass rails polished, timetables pinned crisply to the notice board. His uniform is brushed free of soot, buttons are lined, and boots shined until they catch the light of the high windows. To him, such measures are not extravagances, but extensions of duty. Still, there is a difference in the air. Porters straighten their caps. Clerks shuffle ledgers into precise stacks. Even the signalman, half hidden in his tall box, leans out a little more alertly. The inspector's arrival carries the weight of judgment, and judgment means the possibility of reprimando, more rarely praise. When the train bearing the superintendent arrives, it does so with punctual precision, as though aware it is under scrutiny. The carriage door swings open, and out steps a tall man with a thick coat and a notebook tucked beneath his arm. His eyes move quickly, noting details in silence. The master steps forward, doffing his cap with measured respect, and offers a greeting not too warm, not too cold. "Welcome, sir. All in order here." The superintendent does not answer directly, only nods. His gaze falls upon the clock, then the signal posts, then the polished brass plate of the station's name. He inspects the waiting passengers, their tickets clutched neatly in hand, and the conduct of the porters who carry trunks without delay. Each detail is a test, though the criteria remain unspoken. For the master, such visits are a familiar rhythm. He remains composed, ready to supply figures if asked. The tally of goods moved in the past week, the punctuality rate of departures, the frequency of telegraph messages handled. He knows them all, not from hurried memorization, but from years of habit, years of noting each number in the ledgers. On this day, the inspector requests a walk through the goods shed. Together, they pass rows of crates, stamped with destinations: Birmingham, Bristol, London. The inspector pauses by a stack of grain sacks, presses his hand against the stitching, and raises an eyebrow. The master responds evenly. "Delayed one day owing to wagon fault, sir." Moved promptly thereafter. The explanation is accepted with another curt nod. They return to the platform, where the inspector lingers, checking the alignment of lamps and the condition of the roof beams. Passengers glance curiously, sensing the presence of authority, though they do not know its purpose. For them, it is a curiosity. For the master, it is a test of his ability to maintain dignity under silent judgment. Not all inspections are fair. Some superiors delight in finding fault dust on a sill, a minor smudge of soot on a ledger page. Others, more generous, recognize the constraints of the station and commend its smooth running. The master has experienced both types, yet his response remains the same: a calm acceptance, neither boastful nor defensive, for he knows that the true measure of his work is not in fleeting praise or criticism, but in the ongoing order of the railway itself. In his quarters, There is a drawer filled with letters of commendation, and another with notices of minor reprimand. He keeps both without distinction, as though they were simply different shades of the same duty. In truth, they do little to alter his conduct. Tomorrow, he will again stand at his desk, review the timetables, and guide the rhythm of arrivals and departures as before. The inspector departs on the next train, leaving behind no clear verdict, only the faint tightening of the staff S posture and the faint relief once the carriage rolls out of sight. The master watches it go with a steady expression, then returns to his ledger. He writes the entry for the visit with the same precision as he writes for trains and weather. Inspector present, 2:15 to 2:47. All in order. In this way, the presence of authority is absorbed into the greater cycle. The uniforms, the shining boots, the stern expressions all become part of the ongoing record, folded into the quiet steadiness of the master's daily routine. It is not excitement, not crisis, not calamity. It is simply another detail to be managed, another line in the book, another reminder that order, once established, must always be preserved. And so the master closes his drawer, straightens his chair, and resumes his watch upon the platform. For though the inspector is gone, the trains continue, the crowds return, and the endless duties remain duties that require no witness but the ticking clock. As the late afternoon deepens into evening, the station takes on a quieter, more deliberate rhythm. The bustle of the midday trains has subsided, leaving behind an atmosphere that feels both emptied and expectant, as though the platforms themselves are inhaling slowly, preparing for the measured calm of dusk. The lamps along the platforms are lit one by one, their glass casings glowing with faint halos that push back the creeping shadows. The soft hiss of gaslight mingles with the sound of distant footsteps, the turning of keys in locks, the faint scrape of a broom across stone. The master walks the length of the main platform at an unhurried pace, his hands clasped lightly behind his back. He notes how the lamplighter, perched on a small step-ladder, tilts the flame into the glass with the practiced steadiness of habit. He observes how a porter, young and still learning the measured patience of the trade, sweeps too vigorously, scattering a bit of dust into the newly lit glow. The master does not rebuke him, but rather pauses and offers a soft correction. "Less haste," he says. "A platform is best kept orderly, not only in appearance, but in the manner of its keeping." The porter nods, slowing his strokes, and the dust falls into manageable piles. Such lessons, delivered gently, are remembered longer than harsh words. Inside the station house, the telegraph room hums with its peculiar music. The steady click and pause of messages arriving from distant towns punctuates the quiet. The telegraph clerk, a middle-aged man with thinning hair, transcribes the coded rhythms onto narrow strips of paper, which he pins neatly onto a board above his desk. The master steps in, glances at the board, and traces the messages with his finger. A delay reported from the Northern Line. A consignment confirmed received in Manchester. A request for coal wagons at a junction further down the line. None of these require his direct intervention, yet he reads each carefully, for they form the unseen threads connecting his small station to the vast web of railways stretching across the country. Evening brings a subtle transformation to the waiting rooms as well. Passengers are fewer now, yet they linger in a different mood than those of the morning or midday. A weary tradesman rests with his head against the panelled wall, his satchel slumped by his feet. A mother gently hushes her child, who is restless with the long day's journey. Two elderly women, wrapped in shawls, murmur in low tones about family matters, their voices blending with the soft ticking of the clock overhead. The master passes through silently, acknowledging their presence with a nod, ensuring that the lamps are trimmed, the fire in the hearth sufficient, the benches unbroken. The space is not bustling, yet it is alive with the quiet persistence of human travel. Outside, the goods yard reflects its own cycle of evening labor. A horse-drawn dray rattles in, carrying crates of milk churns that gleam faintly in the lantern light. The porter assigned to the yard checks each one against a list, chalk in hand, marking the wooden lids with swift strokes. The cattle in the pens shift restlessly, their breath visible in the cooling air. The smell of hay and damp earth lingers, mixing with the sharper temps of coal from the nearby stack. The master inspects the arrangement without intrusion, his eye noting the order of things, the placement of the wagons, the readiness for tomorrow's work. To him, the goods yard is a second ledger, one written not in ink, but in stacked crates, coiled ropes, and the neat arrangement of wagons waiting by the siding. By 6:30, the evening passenger train arrives, its whistle cutting sharply through the stillness. Steam spills across the platform, curling into the glow of the lamps. Passengers disembark with an air of quiet fatigue, their movements less hurried than the morning rush. Some greet family members waiting at the gate, while others walk briskly toward the town beyond. A handful board the train in the opposite direction, carrying small parcels, satchels, or simply themselves. The guard raises his lantern, signaling readiness, and with a long exhale of steam, the train pulls away, its red lamps dwindling into the darkening distance. Once the train has gone, the station feels momentarily suspended, as if caught between the rhythm of day and the hush of night. It is in this pause that the master feels the weight of continuity most strongly. The station is never fully still. There is always a sound, a flicker, a task but in the evening calm. The patterns are clearer, more defined. Each duty flows into the next with quiet inevitability. The lamps trimmed, the platforms swept, the goods tallied, the ledgers updated. He returns to his office, where the ledger awaits. Seated at the worn desk, he writes with the same precise hand as always. Evening train arrived, 6:34. Departed, 6:48. Goods yard received milk consignment, 12 churns. Telegraph received northern delay. Each entry is simple, factual, yet together they weave the fabric of his days. The ink dries slowly, the scratch of the pen steady against the quiet backdrop of ticking clock and occasional footstep in the corridor. In the corner of the office stands the small stove, its iron belly glowing faintly. The master adds a coal briquette, listening to the faint crackle as it catches. The warmth spreads slowly through the room, easing the chill of the stone walls. He leans back slightly, not to rest but to observe the glow of the stove. The quiet shelves lined with ledgers, the lamp casting its circle of light across the desk. Nothing extraordinary, yet in its ordinariness lies the essence of his work, steady, enduring, without flourish, yet deeply necessary. Beyond the station house, night continues to draw closer. The last light fades from the sky, leaving the platforms bathed entirely in lamplight. Somewhere down the line, another train is already on its way, its approach certain though not yet visible. The master knows it will arrive, as all trains do, and he will be there, watching, recording, ensuring the constancy of this place where movement never ceases. And so, evening at the station is not merely the closing of a day. It is the folding of time into its proper order, the alignment of tasks with the slow tick of the clock, the quiet assurance that tomorrow will mirror today with the same steady rhythm. In this cycle, the master finds his role, unchanging yet always alive, bound to the endless procession of trains and the life of the railway itself. The evening has deepened fully now, and the station is covered by a mantle of night. The lamps along the platforms glow like small stars caught within their glass casings, their soft halos shimmering against the stone and timber. The air is cooler, edged with dampness that clings to the wooden beams of the station canopy and settles in faint droplets upon the iron rails. A faint mist rises from the fields beyond, drifting toward the boundary fences where it mingles with the smoke that still lingers from the departing trains. The station master makes another round of the premises, as is his habit before the last train of the day. He walks with measured steps, pausing to inspect the hinges on the gates, the fastenings of the signal posts, and the trim of the lamps. The porters, fewer in number now, continue their tasks with a subdued steadiness, sweeping the last of the coal dust from the edges of the platforms and stacking the baggage trolleys neatly against the wall. One porter carries a lantern along the edge of the goods yard, its swinging beam glancing across the outlines of wagons and crates. Another secures the cattle pens, ensuring that each latch is properly fastened, the restless shifting of the animals audible in the dark. Inside the station, the waiting rooms are quiet. The benches hold only a handful of travelers now, most of them solitary. One man reads a folded newspaper under the glow of a wall lamp, his hat tipped low over his forehead. A woman in a dark shawl sits silently, a wicker basket at her side, her gaze fixed on nothing in particular. The fire in the grate burns low, its embers glowing red, the occasional crackle breaking the stillness. A porter steps in, adds to small logs, and pokes the embers until the flames stir gently back to life. The station master, observing, nods approval. Such details matter, for even a late traveler deserves warmth and care. The telegraph office continues its quiet work. The clicking of messages still comes intermittently, though less frequent than during the day. The clerk leans back slightly in his chair, rubbing his eyes, but straightens again at the sound of an incoming signal. He transcribes with steady hand, then pins the strip to the board. The master enters, reads it, and finds the words simple but important. Last freight cleared the junction. Line open. With this assurance, he knows the night's final movements will proceed without hindrance. At the goods yard, preparations for the night's closure continue. The milk churns are loaded onto a small cart bound for the town's dairies, the horse stamping impatiently against the chill. Crates of goods destined for the morning train are stacked in neat rows under tarpaulins, secured with ropes that creak softly in the wind. The porter checks them one last time, marking each with chalk before extinguishing the lantern that had guided his work. The yard grows darker, though not deserted, for its contents remain alive in their own way, waiting silently for the dawn to bring them onward. The master returns to his office once more, the familiar weight of the key in his hand as he unlocks the ledger drawer. He opens the great book, its pages heavy, its margins marked by years of careful entries. He dips his pen, and the scratch of nib against paper fills the silence as he writes. Freight wagons secured. Milk consignment dispatched. Final telegraph received. Line clear. Goods yard secured for the night. Each word is plain, each phrase devoid of flourish. Yet together they form the precise memory of this day, preserved with the same care as all others. The office itself reflects the hour. The lamp on the desk casts a circle of yellow light across the pages, while the corners of the room remain steeped in shadow. The stove continues its low burn, the faint crackle of coal occasionally breaking the quiet. On a shelf by the wall, the clock ticks with steady resolve, its pendulum swinging in the rhythm that seems to bind the station together. Every sound tick, crackle, scratch of pen echoes faintly in the small space, forming a kind of private symphony known only to the master and his work. As the hour draws near, the last passenger train of the day announces itself with a whistle carried faintly on the wind. The master closes the ledger, extinguishes his lamp, and steps out to the platform. The train emerges from the darkness, its headlamp piercing the night like a single eye, steam curling upward into the mist. The platform stirs to life as the few remaining passengers gather themselves. Some step aboard with quiet resolve. Others disembark and vanish into the night beyond the station gates. The exchange is brief, unhurried, yet it marks the true closing of the day's public life. Once the guard signals and the train departs, its red lamps dwindling into the distance, the station becomes quiet again, its labors nearly finished. Only the low rustle of leaves, the occasional creak of wood, and the fading hiss of steam remain. The master walks the length of the platform once more, lantern in hand, pausing to check each door, each gate, each signal. At last, satisfied, he nods to the porter, who extinguishes the lamps in sequence, one by one, until the platform lies in near darkness. The master lingers a moment longer, breathing in the cool night air. Beyond the boundary fence, The fields stretch silent under the weight of mist. The rails glimmer faintly, vanishing into the distance where tomorrow's trains will come again. He knows that this pause, this hush, is only temporary. The railway does not end its rests, gathering itself quietly for the next cycle. Turning, he locks the station doors, the key heavy and solid in his hand. Inside, the office waits, the ledger resting closed upon the desk, the stove slowly dimming, the clock still ticking faithfully toward the next dawn. The master sets the key upon the shelf, removes his hat, and sits briefly in his chair. He does not linger long, for his duties will begin anew in only a few hours. But in this moment, as the station settles into its nightly silence, he allows himself to feel the calm certainty of routine, the unbroken chain of order that stretches from one day into the next. The night is fully settled now, and the railway station rests in its deepest quiet. The faint mist clings low along the ground, softening the outlines of fences, wagons, and lamps that remain. The air has grown colder, sharper, and with each breath, the master sees a pale cloud form and vanish before his face. The porters have gone, their boots no longer echoing against the stone. The station house and its grounds belong, for these hours, to the master alone. Inside the office, the stove has burned down to a low red glow. The warmth it gives is gentle, no longer fierce, but steady enough to hold back the night chill. The desk is cleared, save for the closed ledger and the brass key that rests beside it. The lamp has been extinguished, though a faint glimmer from the grate gives enough light to mark the outlines of the familiar room. The walls, lined with timetables and maps, seem to fade into shadow, as if settling into their own rest. Outside, the tracks stretch into darkness, their steel rails faintly reflecting what little moonlight manages to pierce the mist. The fields beyond the fences are hushed, broken only by the occasional distant sound of a farm dog or the lowing of cattle in the night. The silence is not absolute, for silence rarely exists in the world. Instead, it is filled with the smallest, gentlest of sounds, the drip of condensed steam from the cooling pipes, the rustle of a loose sheet of paper caught. In the breeze, the steady ticking of the station clock. The master makes one last walk along the platform, lantern in hand. The faint pool of light moves before him as he passes the waiting room windows. Their benches empty now, their fires reduced to embers. The iron rails glisten faintly where the lantern's beam catches them, stretching away into the unseen distance. He checks each gate once more, each latch and each door, confirming with practiced touch that all is secure. Though he knows he has already done this, the repetition offers comfort. The railway, after all, is built not on haste, but on steady assurance. Returning to his office, he pauses at the door to look once more along the length of the station. The lamps are extinguished, the goods yard quiet, the wagons motionless. It is not desolate, but expectant, like a stage cleared after a performance, waiting silently for the next. He knows that, in a matter of hours, the first light of morning will stir it all again, the porters arriving with their brooms and barrows. the telegraph lines crackling with early reports, the milk churns waiting at the gate. The railway does not truly sleep. It simply holds its breath between the movements of the day. Inside, he hangs his lantern on its hook, closes the office door, and lowers himself once more into the chair at his desk. He places his hat carefully on the table, folds his hands, and sits quietly. His eyes drift toward the clock, its pendulum swinging with unwavering rhythm. Each tick and tock carries him further into calm, reminding him that time does not rush, but proceeds with steady steps. For a while, he does nothing. He listens to the faint crackle from the dying coals, the steady tick of the clock, and the whisper of the night beyond the window. His work is done, his duties fulfilled, and now he waits not for anything specific, but for the passage of the night itself. It is in these hours, when the station rests, that he feels the depth of his role most strongly. P is its caretaker, not only in the bustle of the day, but in the stillness of the night, when no one watches, yet everything depends on readiness. When at last he rises, he places the brass key back in its drawer, closes it with quiet precision, and leaves the ledger undisturbed. Tomorrow, new lines will be written, fresh entries will be recorded, and the book will continue. For tonight, it rests as he does, its blank page awaiting the morning. He extinguishes the last small lamp, leaving the stove's red glow to fade in its own time. The office falls into near darkness, the faint light of the moon through the window marking the outlines of the familiar forms. Stepping into the adjoining quarters, he prepares himself for rest. His routine is as simple as it is constant. Boots removed and set neatly by the wall, coat hung carefully upon its hook, and a brief glance through the window at the silent tracks outside. The mist is thicker now, settling low across the ground, blurring the edges of rails and fences. It appears almost like a veil drawn across the world, softening it into stillness. He lies down at last upon his bed, the blanket pulled close against the chill. The clock in the office continues its steady beat, audible even here, carrying him gradually into slumber. He knows that before long the porter's knock will come, the first stirrings of the morning will sound, and the station will breathe again. But for now, the quiet is complete, the order secure, and the night belongs to rest. Thus the station passes through its silent hours, not abandoned, not forgotten, but kept in faithful watch by its master, who sleeps with the same calm assurance that he brings to each day. The railway waits, and time moves forward, each tick and each breath carrying it toward the dawn. Morning approaches slowly, first as a faint paling of the sky beyond the station's eastern edge. The mist has not lifted, but seems instead to glow faintly as the first light filters through it, giving the fields and rails a softened silver sheen. The air is colder than before, with dew clinging to every surface on the iron railings, on the slates of the station roof, and on the wooden benches of the platform. It is the kind of morning that greets a man with quiet clarity, not with sudden brilliance, but with the measured unveiling of the day. Inside the master's quarters, the sound of the clock continues steadily, marking the hour when his rest draws to a close. He wakes without haste, for long practice has taught him to rise in step with the railway's rhythm. He folds his blanket neatly and places his boots once more upon his feet, lacing them with care. His coat is lifted from its peg, brushed lightly as habit dictates, and worn with the sense that it is less a garment than a uniform and emblem of continuity and trust. Before leaving the quarters, he pours a small basin of cold water and washes his face, the chill awakening him more firmly than any bell or knock might do. The water is set aside, the basin wiped dry, and the simple ritual concludes. These are not acts for appearance, for there is no one yet to see them, but acts for order's own sake, each part of a chain that secures the day against disorder. Stepping into the office once more, he finds it just as it was left, the ledger waiting unopened, the key in its drawer, the stove now fully cold, its ashes pale and fine. The clock tells him the hour, its pendulum steady as ever. He draws back the curtains, letting in the first of the morning light. It falls across the desk in long, angled shafts, illuminating the dust that floats faintly in the air. The familiar sight reassures him. The world beyond has changed in the hours of night, but within these walls, the order he set remains unbroken. He takes the brass key once more and unlocks the outer doors. The hinges creak faintly as the wood swings open, and the morning air flows in, damp with mist, sharp with dew. The platform lies quiet, though not for long. Already in the distance he can hear the first stirrings of the village, the call of a cock crowing the sound of a cart's wheels on the damp earth road, and faintly the early footsteps of the porter arriving for his day's work. As the porter approaches, cap pulled low and coat buttoned tight against the morning chill, the master greets him with a nod. Few words pass between them, for their tasks are long known and seldom need fresh discussion. The porter collects his broom and barrow, beginning at once to sweep the damp leaves from the platform. The scrape of bristles against stone is steady, rhythmic, and soon becomes part of the station's morning music. The master walks the platform again, his boots leaving faint imprints on the damp boards where dew has gathered. He inspects the lamps, ensuring that each has been properly extinguished, and notes where the glass must be cleaned of soot before evening. He checks the benches for dampness, brushing them with a handkerchief where needed, and inspects the waiting rooms, confirming that each is orderly and ready for the first arrivals of the day. Soon the goods yard begins to stir. A pair of carters arrive with their horses, leading wagons loaded with milk churns destined for the morning train. Their breath steams in the chill air, and the creak of leather harness and rattle of iron rims on cobblestone joins the porter's broom in filling the quiet. The master notes each arrival, ensuring that the loads are set properly on the platform, aligned neatly in their accustomed place. Disorder at this hour would only multiply with the bustle that follows. He returns then to his office, lights the morning lamp, and opens the ledger. The pen is dipped, the nib touched lightly to the paper, and the first entry of the day is set down with deliberate strokes. The words are simple, the figures precise, the date, the weather, the state of the tracks and lamps, and the early arrivals of goods. Each line is written without haste, for the act itself is part of the station's rhythm, binding the present day to all that came before. The telegraph stirs faintly, its instrument clicking as the first morning messages begin to pass along the line. The master listens, translates the brief signals with practiced ease, and notes them in the margin of the ledger. A train has departed from the junction. Another stands ready at the next town. The line ahead is clear. These are not dramatic announcements, but steady assurances that the great chain of movement, linking village to town and town to city, is once more in motion. By the time the clock strikes 6, the mist has begun to thin, lifting gradually from the fields. The porter pauses to lean on his broom, wiping his brow, though the air is still cold, and the carters tighten their reins as the first faint whistle sounds in the distance. The morning train is approaching, its presence felt before it is seen, and the station no longer silent, no longer empty, prepares itself to resume the endless rhythm of service. The master, standing at the head of the platform, adjusts his coat, places his hands neatly behind his back, and waits. He does not fidget, he does not call out, for there is no need. Everything is in its place, each task begun in order, each man at his post. The railway, like the morning itself, unfolds not in haste, but in steady sequence. The mist rises, the rails gleam, the whistle grows louder, and the day is begun. The whistle lengthens into a steady note, clear and metallic, as the train approaches through the thinning mist. A vibration begins to hum faintly beneath the boards of the platform, carried through the rails before the eye perceives the engine itself. The master listens without shifting his stance, measuring the distance by ear. He has heard this sound each morning for years, yet it remains worthy of precise attention. The porter, broom in hand, straightens his posture and steps aside, for the platform must appear orderly at the moment of arrival. Soon the locomotive emerges, first as a dark silhouette against the pale fog, then as a form of iron and motion. Steam pours from its funnel, rolling outward in great white clouds that blend with the mist already settled over the fields. Its lamps cast pale circles of light, glimmering faintly in the damp air. With deliberate rhythm, the wheels grind against the rails, slowing as the brakes are applied, producing a deep metallic groan that echoes across the yard. The train comes to rest with a final hiss of escaping steam. The driver leans briefly from his cab, raising a hand in greeting to the master, who responds with a measured nod. These gestures require no words. They are part of a long-established pattern, as steady as the turning of the wheels. The fireman, face smudged with soot, climbs down to check the water bile, while the guard steps from his van, watch in hand, confirming the time of arrival with his own precise note. The passengers begin to alight, though they are few at this early hour. A farmer in a heavy coat, carrying a basket covered with cloth. A tradesman with a small valise, his steps brisk but measured. A woman with a child, the little one clinging to her hand as they descend from the carriage. Each looks briefly about the platform, noting the damp air and the quiet order, before moving toward the station doors. The porter assists where needed, lifting luggage, guiding the uncertain, and directing them gently onward. In the opposite direction, goods are prepared for loading. The milk churns are lifted, to men at each, their iron handles clanking as they are set upon the guard's van. The carters assist, steadying the horses, ensuring no haste disturbs the process. Each churn is accounted for, its number checked against the paper in the master's ledger. He watches closely, pencil in hand, making small marks to confirm that none are overlooked. To lose a churn would mean more than inconvenience, would mean a breach of the order that holds station and village alike in harmony. The guard, satisfied with his tally, gives a low whistle, and the process continues. Crates of produce are added, neatly stacked, their labels tied with string. A basket of hens, restless and clucking faintly, is secured with care so that no movement might harm them. The master notes each detail without speaking, his presence itself enough to assure that diligence is maintained. Within the waiting room, the fire has been lit, the coals glowing faintly against the chill of morning. Passengers who must linger sit quietly upon the benches, their breath still visible in the air. A newspaper, freshly folded, rests upon the table, though few take it up at this hour. The room smells faintly of coal smoke and damp wool, a familiar scent that marks the season. Meanwhile, the locomotive stands ready, its engine hissing softly as it waits for departure. The driver checks his gauges, the fireman stirs the coal, and the guard inspects his watch once more. The master steps forward to the edge of the platform, scanning the length of the train with a careful eye. Each carriage is in order, each coupling secure, each window closed. He raises his hand in acknowledgement to the guard, who responds with a whistle sharp and short. The engine bellows once more, louder now, and the great wheels begin to turn. Steam bursts outward in thick clouds, enveloping the platform for a moment before drifting skyward. The train gathers speed, slowly at first, then with a steady pull that draws it forward into the clearing light of day. Its sound diminishes gradually, the rhythm of wheels upon rails fading into the distance, until only the faint echo remains. When it is gone, the station resumes its quiet. The porter returns to his broom, sweeping where damp footprints have marked the boards. The carters guide their empty wagons back toward the yard, reins creaking in the chill air. The few passengers who remain settle into silence within the waiting room, their coats drawn close, their eyes upon the fire. The master, standing once more upon the platform, allows his gaze to rest upon the horizons. The mist continues to rise, revealing the outlines of hedges, barns, and distant trees. The fields glisten faintly with dew, and the faint warmth of the sun begins to touch the world. He draws a breath, steady and deliberate, then turns back toward his office. There, the ledger awaits, open upon the desk. He takes up his pen, dipping it into the inkwell with practiced ease, and writes the record, the time of arrival, the tally of goods, the departure without delay. The figures are precise, the language plain. No flourish is added, for none is needed. The record is not meant to entertain, but to endure. The telegraph clicks once more, another message passing along the line. He listens, translates, and notes the simple fact. The train has cleared the next signal box, the way ahead confirmed. A small satisfaction settles upon him, the assurance that the chain holds firm, link by link. The clock, steady upon the wall, strikes the quarter hour. Its sound fills the room, familiar as breath, reminding him that the day has only just begun. There will be more trains, more goods, more records to be kept. Each moment will pass into the ledger, each task carried out with the same measured care. Nothing more is needed. The station endures, and in its endurance, so too does the rhythm of life. The sun has now risen fully above the horizon, though its light remains pale, softened by the lingering mist. The fields beyond the station lie quiet, hedgerows casting faint shadows across the damp ground. Birds begin to stir, their calls threading gently through the stillness. But within the station, the rhythm continues without change. The porter has finished his sweeping and now stands near the gate, watching for any late arrivals who may approach with hurried steps. His uniform, though worn at the cuffs, is brushed clean, and the brass of his buttons glints faintly in the light. Beside him rests the handcart, ready for whatever luggage may come. He leans upon it lightly, eyes steady upon the road. The master sits once more at his desk, his ledger open to the fresh page. The ink of earlier entries has already dried, neat and permanent. He takes a moment to sharpen his pencil, the quiet scraping of the blade against the wood filling the room. Each shaving curls neatly upon the blotter, gathered like tiny spirals, soon swept away. The pencil is then set beside the pen, both ready for use as the day requires. The telegraph stirs again, its measured clicks forming patterns that only trained ears can grasp. He leans forward, transcribing each mark upon the pad, his handwriting small but exact. The message confirms another arrival due within the hour, a goods service rather than a passenger train. He notes the time carefully, underlining it once, and sets the pad aside. There is comfort in these signals, for they ensure that each movement upon the rails is known, measured, and expected. Out upon the platform, the goods yard is already stirring. A wagon has arrived, its wheels damp with dew, the horse steaming faintly in the cool air. 2 men lift sacks from its bed, placing them carefully upon a wooden trolley. Each sack is marked with black paint, the letters denoting grain to be forwarded northward. The carter speaks little, his focus upon the load, while the men work steadily, their breath forming clouds in the chill. The porter soon joins them, guiding the trolley toward the covered siding where the goods wagons stand waiting. Within the waiting room, the woman with the child still lingers. She sits with her hands folded upon her lap, the child's head resting against her shoulder. The fire burns low but steady, its warmth enough to soften the air. A faint drip of condensation falls from the window frame, striking the stone floor with regular rhythm. She does not stir, her gaze resting upon the faint glow of the coals, while the child's breathing deepens into the quiet rhythm of rest. The station dog, a steady creature with mottled fur, pads across the yard, pausing briefly to watch the men at their work. Bit lowers its nose to the ground, following a scent along the edge of the platform before circling back to the office door. There it settles with a sigh, curling upon the worn mat as if to stand guard. Its presence is not required, yet it has become as much a part of the station as the clock or the telegraph. The master rises from his chair and steps outside, his watch in hand. The air holds the faint temp of coal, smoke, and damp wood, a scent carried upon the morning breeze. He surveys the yard, the wagons, the workers, each detail noted with calm precision. Satisfied, he closes his watch with a click and returns to his office, where the pen awaits its task. The ledger grows thicker with each passing season, its pages filled with the plain record of arrivals and departures, of goods sent and received, of times marked without flourish. These volumes rest upon the shelf in careful order, each spine labeled with a year, each page a quiet testament to the persistence of order. No entry is more important than another, yet together they form a chain that stretches back beyond memory. The goods train announces itself in the distance, a low rumble upon the horizon, its sound distinct from that of a passenger service. He hears it first, then the porter, then the carters, all pausing briefly to measure the distance. Soon the dark shape appears, its wagons stretching long behind the engine, wheels clattering steadily upon the rails. Steam rises above it, drifting pale against the morning sky. The master steps once more to the edge of the platform, his stance straight, his eyes upon the approaching train. The guard waves from the van. The driver leans briefly from his cab, and the fireman tends to the coal. The sound grows, fills the air, then slows as brakes are applied, the wagons grinding gradually to a halt. Another entry is ready to be made, another moment folded into the steady rhythm of the station's day. The sun lifts higher still, warming the mist until it begins to fade. The village beyond the fields stirs to life, though from here only faint movements can be seen. A plume of smoke from a chimney, a figure moving along the distant road, the slow turn of a mill's wheel. Yet the station does not change its pace. It remains as it always has measured, quiet and enduring. The master draws a breath, deep and even, then opens his ledger to the fresh line. The goods train stands waiting, its wagons ready for exchange, and he prepares once more to set pen to paper. Another record, another note, another link in the unbroken chain. The day advances, steady and sure, with no need for haste. The station has returned to its steady rhythm. The train has come and gone. The ledger closed for the hour, and the air holds only the quiet drift of smoke and the faint call of distant birds. Nothing remains hurried, nothing demands more than patience. The porter rests against his cart, his duties complete for now. The woman with the child has departed, leaving the waiting room silent once more. The dog lies curled upon the mat, its breathing deep and slow. The clock ticks gently, each stroke blending into the stillness. Beyond the hedgerows, the fields stretch outward in calm order, their furrows damp with dew, their edges softened by morning light. The mist has thinned, and the day moves on with quiet certainty. Time continues as it always has measured, steady without demand. Here, at the close, nothing more is needed. The trains will come, the trains will go, and the ledger will hold their passing in simple lines of ink. The rhythm endures, unbroken, and so, with the quiet of the station resting round you, you may let your own thoughts settle. The gentle patterns of movement and stillness, of order and calm, remain steady whether your eyes stay open or drift closed. The day will carry on. For now, you may rest